Senator McConnell, thanks for joining us.
Sure, glad to be here.
I wanted to start by asking you, now that Republicans have had control of the Senate, we're in the midst of another election season, what have Americans gotten out of this Republican Senate, and why should they give the Republicans control of the Senate again?
Well, even though if you listen to the presidential candidates, you'd think not much was happening, it's been a very productive Congress. Our view was, even though you had divided government, we had big differences with the administration. There were plenty of things we could agree on and make some progress for the country. Among the things we put on his desk that he did not sign, the Keystone Pipeline, the repeal of Obamacare, the defunding of Planned Parenthood, the Clean Power Plan regulations, none of which he signed. But we thought it was important to point out the differences. Then on things that we could agree on, we did Trade Promotion Authority. We did a rewrite of No Child Left Behind, the elementary and secondary education law. We did a 5-year highway bill that hadn't happened since the 90s. We did a cybersecurity bill. We did permanent tax relief for R&D tax credit for Section 179 and also for the Internet tax moratorium, permanent law. So we think it was, by any objective standard, a productive year. We'd love to have done more, but after all, Barack Obama's in the White House.
So it sounds to me as though you're suggesting that maybe that story of the accomplishments isn't really getting through, even with some Republicans.
It's not getting through because, I think a lot of people in the media world promoted the notion that things could be achieved that couldn't be achieved, that we could overcome the president's veto pen and change the country with him there. That's what George Will, the columnist, calls the politics of futile gesture. You set up a mission that cannot possibly be achieved, and then when it doesn't get achieved, rather than blaming the president who keeps you from achieving it, you blame yourselves.
Speaking of one of the areas where the president is at odds with Senate Republicans, the Supreme Court and this vacancy. Do you think that some Senate Republicans are going to suffer at the polls because they are not going forward with a nomination?
Not a single one. We know the Democrats, if the shoe were on the other foot, they would not be confirming a Republican president's nomination for the Supreme Court in the middle of a presidential election year. We think the American people ought to decide this. We're not going to move on this nomination. We're not going to have hearings. We're not going to have votes on it. Whoever the next president is will get to make this nomination. Look, it's been 80 years, Ramesh, since a vacancy created in a presidential election year was filled. You have to go back to 1888. Grover Cleveland was in the White House to find the last time when a vacancy was created in a presidential year. A Senate controlled by the party opposite the president filled a vacancy. Not going to happen, and it's not going to cost a single Republican candidate for the Senate any votes at all.
Could you tell our viewers, without betraying any confidence, how your White House meeting went where this presumably came up?
Well, I reminded the president that this era of contentious confirmations of Supreme Court justices was all started by Democratic senates. I also reminded the president, the vice president, the Democratic leader, and the ranking member of the Judiciary Committee that they were the only ones who've ever filibustered a Supreme Court justice. None of us had, us meaning Senator Grassley and myself. So we didn't. I told the president I thought we had not to spend the whole meeting talking about this because clearly we were not going to confirm his nominee.
How was that received?
Well, he sort of knew what we were going to say, and so we spent the rest of the meeting talking about other matters.
The press has carried some reports that you've said that if Donald Trump is the Republican nominee, Senate Republicans will drop him like a hot rock. Can you confirm whether that's true?
Look, there have been all kinds of discussions about what goes on in private meetings, and what I'm hoping for is a nominee who can win. And the definition of a nominee who can win is one who can carry purple states. We all know red and we know blue. A purple state is a state that can go either way. The next president of the United States will carry New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, Ohio, maybe Wisconsin, Iowa, Nevada, Colorado, Virginia, and Florida. President Obama carried all of them twice. President Bush 43 carried all but one of them twice, and that's why they had 8 years in the White House. So we know what it takes to win, and I'm hoping we have a nominee who can appeal to the kind of voters you find in those swing states who are going to determine who the president is.
If the election goes the other way and Hillary Clinton were to be the next president, do you foresee her acting the way President Obama has, or more the way her husband governed?
No, she'll be an Obama Democrat. I think it's perfectly clear that that's what she always was. She was not the president. Her husband was flexible because he decided to deal with the government he had rather than the government he wished he had. President Reagan did the same thing. President Obama, on the other hand, has pressed the envelope on the executive side. Regulations, executive orders. He's not been interested in coming to the political center. And I think Hillary Clinton has been a dedicated liberal her entire life, and I don't expect her to act any differently from President Obama. She will be a third term for Barack Obama.
And a lot of your colleagues, I know, are exercised about executive power and what they see as excessive unilateralism from this president. Do you believe that President Obama has now set a precedent that a future Republican president will use, or do you think that there's enough of a party-wide reaction against this that won't happen?
Well, it's certainly going to be tempting for whoever the next president is, anytime they can't get what they want through Congress, to try to press for limits. I don't think there's any question about it. It'll be a precedent that will be very tempting for the next president, regardless of party. It's very difficult for Congress to stop that because the only way you can stop it is through some funding bill, which, of course, he has to sign. And it reminds everybody of just how important the presidency is in our system. If we're fortunate enough to elect a conservative president next year, I hope that right after taking the oath of office, he goes into the Oval Office and starts undoing as many of these onerous executive orders that have ground our economy into this slow, tepid 2% or less growth rate, and give our country the chance to get going again. So the presidency is really, really important.
Speaker Ryan has talked about creating a Republican agenda from the Congress. Do you agree with him that that's what should be done, or do you think that the presidential candidate should lead the way?
Well, I think it's a good idea. I support it. And the House is particularly suited for that because they can do things so quickly. Senate procedurally is not a great place for rolling out things. But I like what he's up to. I know what he's doing. We're coordinating on it. I'm in favor of it. And hopefully we have a nominee who's open to our ideas. I mean, we need to have a nominee who's actually a conservative. And that's not clear as we speak.